Check out these breathtaking historical photos from the Cuban force during the Cold War. In 1962, Fidel Castro's alliance with the Soviet Union caused growing US concern as a failed attempt to oust him emboldened both Castro and the Kremlin. The Cold War was heating up in America's backyard. May 1962. In May of 1962, Nikita Khrushchev, the premier of Soviet Union, extended an offer to install offensive nuclear weapons in Cuba. Fidel Castro, the leader of Cuba, readily agreed to this proposal as he viewed the missiles as a necessary deterrent against another attempt by the United States to forcibly remove him from power. Throughout that summer, the missiles were transported to Cuba under a veil of extreme secrecy. Khrushchev's plan hinged on the successful operationalization of the missiles before the Americans discovered their presence on the island. However, US intelligence swiftly became aware of some unusual activities taking place in Cuba, which eventually led to the discovery of the missiles. Early October 1962. In early October 1962, U-2 and Navy reconnaissance flights provided evidence that the Soviet Union was constructing missile launch sites throughout Cuba. President John F. Kennedy summoned his national security team to determine a course of action. After weighing all options, the administration announced a naval quarantine of Cuba to prevent further delivery of offensive military weapons. This was a risky move, as a blockade is considered an act of war. President Kennedy consulted with Admiral George W. Anderson and relied on the Navy to carry out the mission. The burden fell on the US Navy under Admiral Robert L. Denison, who intercepted merchant shipping en route to Cuba and Soviet submarines in the area. The USS Blandy tracked a Soviet submarine which was carrying nuclear-tipped torpedoes and was part of a Soviet effort to establish a naval base in Cuba. US destroyers maintained the quarantine, and radar picket ships supported the US Air Force's Air Defense Command in preparing to defend American airspace. The aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, and marine forces of the Second Fleet were poised to launch strikes against Soviet and Cuban forces ashore if the quarantine failed. This standoff lasted for 13 days. Late October 1962. In late October 1962, the world held its breath as Khrushchev sent a message to President Kennedy through Radio Moscow. He stated that the Turkish government had ordered the dismantling of weapons in Cuba as well as their trading and return to the Soviet Union. The Soviet ships turned back and the crisis was over. Khrushchev, faced with the armed might of the United States and its allies, had little choice but to find a way out of the difficult situation in which he had placed himself and his country. President Kennedy did not press the advantage that the strength of US and allied naval and military forces gave him, which allowed the Soviet leader to peacefully disengage his nation from this most serious of confrontations. For the rest of the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union never again reached the brink of what would have been a world-altering nuclear conflict. The lesson is clear. The US Navy has kept the sea free for over 200 years. The Navy not only protected America in 1962, but it continues to provide a potent deterrent to any force that threatens the peace today. Conclusion. In 1962, the world came close to a nuclear war between the US and the Soviet Union due to the installations of missiles in Cuba. The US Navy played a crucial role in enforcing the naval quarantine, and its strength allowed for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. The incident highlights the Navy's role in protecting the US and promoting peace.